Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And we're going to start tonight's show with this.
I am Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, your senior drill instructor. From now on, you will speak only when spoken to. And the first and last words out of your filthy sewers will be, sir. Do you maggots understand that?
Sir, yes, sir.
Bullshit, I can't hear you. Sound off like you got a pair.
Sir, yes, sir.
If you ladies leave my island, if you survive recruit training, you will be a weapon. You will be a minister of death praying for war. But until that day, you are pukes. You are the lowest form of life on earth. You are not even human beings. You are nothing but unorganized, grabastic pieces of amphibian shit. Because I am hard, you will not like me. But the more you hate me, the more you will learn. I am hard, but I am fair. There is no racial bigotry here. I do not look down on niggers, kikes, wops, or greasers. Here you are all equally worthless. And my orders are to weed out all non-hackers who do not pack the gear to serve in my beloved corps. Do you maggots understand that?
Sir, yes, sir.
Bullshit, I can't hear you.
Sir, yes, sir.
Well, for those of you who don't recognize it, that was Staff Sergeant R Lee Ermey, who died recently at the age of 74, and he created one of the most memorable characters in movies. Lee Ermey was a real-life Marine Corps drill instructor. He'd been to Vietnam, and in 1987, Stanley Kubrick called upon him to be a technical advisor in his movie about Vietnam, Full Metal Jacket. After he came out of the Marine Corps, Lee Ermey had some acting experience, and he read for the part. And let's just say no one was even close, and Stanley Kubrick knew it right away. So instead of technical advisor, he became Gunnery Sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket. And not only did he get the role, but he got to improvise most of his part, which was something that Stanley Kubrick virtually never did. But it paid off because, as I said, it was an iconic character that he created. He has a bunch of great scenes in the movie, but I'm going to give you my favorite, where he has all the recruits sitting outside on the bleachers, and he gives them a lecture on shooting.
Do any of you people know who Charles Whitman was? None of you dumbasses knows. Private Cowboy.
Sir, he was that guy who shot all those people from that tower in Austin, Texas, sir.
That's affirmative. Charles Whitman killed 12 people from a 28-story observation tower at the University of Texas, from distances of up to 400 yards. Anybody know who Lee Harvey Oswald was? Private Snowball.
Sir, he shot Kennedy, sir.
That's right. And do you know how far away he was?
Sir, it was pretty far from that book suppository building, sir.
All right, knock it off. 250 feet. He was 250 feet away and shooting at a moving target. Oswald got off 3 rounds with an old Italian bolt-action rifle in only 6 seconds and scored 2 hits, including a headshot. Do any of you people know where these individuals learned how to shoot? Private Joker.
Sir, in the Marines, sir.
In the Marines. Outstanding. Those individuals showed what one motivated Marine and his rifle can do. And before you ladies leave my island, you will all be able to do the same thing.
I'll tell you something. Stanley Kubrick has a lot of great characters in movies. Jack Nicholson in The Shining, Peter Sellers in Dr. Strangelove, Kirk Douglas in Paths of Glory, Hal in 2001, James Mason in Lolita, but none of them is better than Lee Ermey in Full Metal Jacket. Gonna miss you, Sergeant Ermey. Semper Fi. Well, we're gonna move on to our feature, Joe Gargan, who died. Well, he didn't die recently. He died about 4 months ago at the age of 87. And you probably haven't read too much about him because there were virtually no obituaries about him, but he was a fairly prominent member of the Kennedy family. He wasn't actually a Kennedy. His mother was the sister of Rose Kennedy, the matriarch of the family. So he was a nephew to Rose and Joe and a cousin of Joe Jr., John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Teddy Kennedy. And he was closest in age to Teddy Kennedy. And because he lost both of his parents early, he spent many summers at the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport, where he and Teddy became good friends. In fact, he was almost another brother to Teddy. According to biography.com, he fit in capably with the competitive, ambitious Kennedys. He learned to ride horses at a young age and became highly adept at sailing. Athletic enough to play football at Georgetown Prep, he often starred in the Klan's backyard touch football games. He learned the ropes of campaign work by helping out on John F. Kennedy's successful run for the U.S. Senate in 1952. After passing the Massachusetts bar in 1956, he became a trial lawyer. However, he was swallowed up by the Kennedy presidential campaign of 1960, for which he served as an advance man, and he was also tapped for the Ted Kennedy Senate campaigns in 1962 and 64. He became the first assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Massachusetts in 1961, but was called back to family political service in 1968 when he became chairman of Robert F. Kennedy's presidential campaign, which ended when Robert Kennedy was assassinated in June of 1968. At that point, he became the point man for Teddy Kennedy, who was a senator from Massachusetts, and his presumed run for the presidency in 1972. But in 1969, the incident at Chappaquiddick intervened and changed everything. Let's just go over the Chappaquiddick incident a little bit. It happened in July of 1969 on the same weekend as the moon landing. I refer you to the Neil Armstrong podcast for that. And actually, Joe Gargan was sort of responsible for the get-together that weekend because it was a bunch of single boiler room girls. Those were girls who worked on the Robert Kennedy campaign the year before with Joe Gargan, and a bunch of men, most of whom were married, and including Ted Kennedy. What could go wrong there, huh? Well, what went wrong there for Senator Kennedy that night was he took one of the boiler room girls, a girl named Mary Jo Kopechne, away from the party out on a drive. He said he was bringing her to the ferry to take her back to the mainland, but she left her purse and her keys there, which suggests that she thought she was coming back. Anyway, they took the opposite route of getting to the ferry, and they had to drive over a small one-lane bridge. Kennedy's car went off the bridge with Mary Jo in it, and his actions in the next 10 hours after he extricated himself from the car will always remain something of a mystery, but here are two things he didn't do. He didn't report the accident for 10 hours, and he didn't save Mary Jo, who either drowned or asphyxiated when he left the scene. All this is portrayed in the recent movie Chappaquiddick, and while that may not be completely true, no matter how you spin it, there really was no favorable story to Ted Kennedy as to his actions that night. Anyway, at some point he went back and got Joe Gargan, who at that point was implicated in the whole thing because he knew about it. Joe Gargan probably tried to fix it as well as he could, but there wasn't much he could do as long as Ted Kennedy didn't report it to the authorities. And ultimately, Ted Kennedy got back to Hyannisport, where they had the big-time fixers come in. Ted Sorensen, Bob McNamara, and those guys. They got Mary Jo's body out of Massachusetts as fast as they could, back to her home in Pennsylvania, so there was no autopsy. They took care of the local authorities in Edgartown, Massachusetts, so there were no major charges launched against Ted Kennedy. They settled for something like leaving the scene of an accident, which you got a suspended sentence for. Fortunately, all the reporters were busy covering the moon landing, so didn't get that much attention at the time. And a couple of days later, Ted Sorensen crafted a bogus speech for Teddy Kennedy to give on national television. But when Ted Sorensen writes the speeches, even a bogus speech can sound convincing to the public. And that's essentially what happened. The public took Ted Kennedy back. He could never run for president again, although he actually did run for president in 1980. But his campaign against Jimmy Carter was short-lived, to say the least. And he wound up with a 5-decade career in the Senate, one of the longest careers in history. Meanwhile, Joe Gargan got swallowed up in the whole thing. He was trying to do the right thing and convinced Teddy Kennedy to be honest with the public. The movie even says he asked Teddy Kennedy to resign from the Senate, but I don't know if that's true or not. Whatever, he wasn't the total team player on the Kennedy team on that one, and that caused a little bit of friction with Teddy. So his longtime friend and cousin got cut out of the Klan. Joe Gargan didn't talk about it until 20 years later for a book somebody else wrote, and he didn't portray Teddy in an especially favorable light, which probably wasn't that hard to do. He became the vice president of the Merchants Bank in Hyannisport. He was on the Massachusetts Board of Appeals before he retired in 2013. The most amazing part of this story was there were no obituaries on Joe Gargan. I actually think he may have had a brief one in the Lowell, Massachusetts newspaper, which didn't even touch on Chappaquiddick. But when he died in December, the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, nothing. And what was especially amazing was the Boston Globe, which covers the Kennedys like the Red Sox, had nothing except a paid death notice. So Joe Gargan, who was essentially a Kennedy family member who worked on JFK's campaign, who ran RFK's presidential campaign, and was a central figure in Chappaquiddick, didn't get an obit from the Boston Globe. Figure that out. We're going to close tonight with Milos Forman, who died recently at the age of 86. He was the Czech film director who directed two of the great pictures of the second half of the 20th century. Both won the Academy Award for Best Picture. He's one of only 3 directors to have 2 Academy Awards for Best Picture. The other 2 are Francis Ford Coppola and Clint Eastwood, so not even Spielberg has done that. Both his parents died in concentration camps during the war. He went back to Czechoslovakia after the war, but left when the Soviets invaded Prague. In 1968, he was knocking around New York City when he got a call from Hollywood to adapt Ken Kesey's famous novel, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Here's the trailer with Jack Nicholson and Louise Fletcher, who won Best Actor Academy Award and Best Actress Academy Award, respectively.
Why do you think they might think that?
Don't make a bit of sense to me.
Do you think there's anything wrong with your mind, really?
Another thing, Doc. Excuse me, miss. Do you think it might be possible to turn that music down so maybe a couple of the boys could talk?
Your hand is staining my window.
God almighty, she's got you guys coming and going. A little change never hurt, huh? A little variety? Oh, come on. You're not going to say that now. You're not going to say that now. You're going to pull that henhouse shit now. In the booth, the chief just voted it was 10 to 9. I want that television set turned on right now.
I don't think he's overly psychotic.
I want something done!
He's dangerous.
We're from the State Mental Institution. This is Dr. Cheswick, Dr. Tabor, Dr. Scanlon. I'm Dr. McMurphy.
How about it, you creeps, you lunatics, mental defectives?
Here he is accepting the Academy Award from Diane Keaton and William Wyler.
Those nominated for Best Achievement in Directing are Federico Fellini for Amarcord,
Stanley Kubrick for Barry Lyndon,
Sidney Lumet for Dog Day Afternoon,
Robert Altman for National.
Milos Forman for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
The winner is Milos Forman.
First, I thank the Academy for the company of the nominees they did put me in. I'm very proud of that. And I want to think what possible reasons I'm here now. I can find two. The first is that this year the Academy members recognize the fact that last year I spent more time in mental institution than the others. The second might be that America still is big, beautiful, hospitable, and open country. I thank you so, Michael, Jack, Louise, Ken Kesey, and especially I want to thank all those whose names I don't have time to mention now. Thank you.
And he repeated Best Director, Best Picture, and Best Actor with Tom Hulce with Amadeus in 1985.
Are we going to appall you with something confidential and disgusting? Let's hope so, because that is what you really like. Unconfessed crimes and buried wickedness. If that is what brings you to us, the prospect of hearing horrors, you shall not go unrewarded. I don't believe it.
The whole city is talking.
You hear it all over.
What a story.
What a scandal.
What a comedy.
What a tragedy.
Incredible.
I don't believe it.
Who can believe it?
What horrors have you heard?
Tell us.
Tell us.
Tell us at once.
Tell us about Wolfgang.
Amadeus.
Mozart.
Mozart.
Mozart? How good is he? Here's Mozart. He's remarkable. He's an unprincipled, spoiled, conceited brat. I'm a vulgar man, but I assure you, my music is not.
He is divinely inspired.
He is arrogant, vulgar, obscene.
He creates music for the gods.
He is passionate.
He burns with fire.
He is an angel.
He is a devil.
He claimed he'd been poisoned.
Some said he accused a man.
Some said the man was Salieri.
Salieri?
Salieri.
I don't believe it.
All the same.
Could it be possible?
Did Salieri do it after all?
Did he murder Amadeus?
Amadeus. The man. The music. The magic. The madness. The murder. The mystery. The motion picture. Amadeus. Everything you've heard is true.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps, as a final tribute to Milos Forman. What else can we close with but a little Mozart? So I'm going to go with one of my favorites, a little Rondo alla Turca.